I welcome you all for the General Studies Paper 3 discussion. I hope your exam went well today. And for those who haven't written the mains, use this as a session to understand the approach for each question. Okay. So before we go ahead with the paper, students, the general observation about the paper is that the questions are pretty much direct. And you will be surprised that out of the 6 to 7 questions that have come from economy, close to 5 questions can be answered from the inputs of the previous year questions. So in my classes, I always emphasize that the secret to clear the exams is the art of note making. So when we are talking about the art of note making, if you see, first we always have to understand the concept. Link the concept with current affairs. And if a concept is in current affairs, the concept being asked is of a higher chance. And always also connect the concept with the previous year papers. So this 3-step approach is what you need to take when you're making notes. And if you have done this approach, you would have found this paper to be easy, or I can say that you would have been able to write a better answer. So the familiarity of the questions would have been better for you if you had taken this approach. So students, the lesson that you can take forward before we start this session is that rely on the previous year questions for General Studies Paper 3. Why am I recommending to rely on the previous year questions is because General Studies Paper 3 is a very dynamic paper. If you look at the syllabus is not setting a boundary, unlike history or unlike any other static subjects. Here, the boundary is very vague. So how do you set the boundary for your preparation? And the boundary can be set through the analysis of the previous year papers related to each of the topics of the syllabus. So if you see my class, you would have noticed that many of the questions could be answered from the class notes that I have given. So by working on the previous year questions and setting a boundary from that and starting your preparation, aligning your preparation to the boundary set by the previous year questions will help you keep your notes crisp, and you will be able to answer most of the questions. So with this understanding, today let us go about and see how the question paper has come and how do we approach each of the question and what is the demand of the question, and if any facts that has to be importantly be mentioned in the question, we will see as a part of the discussion today. So the first question, so if you look at the first question is about explain the intra-generational and intergenerational issues of equity from the perspective of inclusive growth and sustainable development. So students, here the action word is they are asking you to explain the issues of equity, which is intergenerational and intergenerational issues of equity, and from the perspective of inclusive growth and sustainable development. So here, for your thought process to work in these type of questions, you can go with the perspective part of it. You have to set anchor points. The anchor points can be set by understanding or by defining the inclusive growth and sustainable development as a concept. So students, if you look at inclusive growth and sustainable development as a concept, the keywords that you can note about is, first one, employment. Second one, reduced poverty. Third one, access to essential services. Fourth, equality of opportunity. Fifth, environmentally sustainable growth. Environmental sustainability. Sixth, good governance. Seventh, a gender sensitive society. So these are the keywords that define what an inclusive growth is. So now, when you can list down these points, when you have it in your notes, or when you are able to list down these points, from this perspective, if you are able to emphasize as to how this inequity is caused due to these parameters, you will be able to actually explain this question. So from the perspective of employment and how a jobless growth can lead to inequality, reduced poverty, access to essential services, equality of opportunity, environmental sustainability, good governance, gender sensitivity, right? Social justice. So these are the keywords that determine what an inclusive growth and sustainable development is. So whenever they're talking about a perspective, first define what the concept is. And from that perspective, you emphasize about what is intergenerational and intragenerational equity. So students, to explain a little more brief about that, intragenerational refers to the generation which is presently living and what is the inequality between that generation. And intergenerational inequity refers to the inequity that is lying between the generations from one generation to another. So the one that is currently living and the one that is yet to be born. So here they are asking you to explain the issues, these intergenerational and intragenerational issues that are present from the perspective of inclusive growth and sustainability is what the question is expecting, and this is how you need to approach it. Next. So if you look at the second question is asking you to define potential GDP and explain its determinants, which is the first part of the question. What are the factors that have been inhibiting India from realizing its potential GDP? So students, even this question could have been answered by looking into the previous year questions. So here if you see the first part of the question, they are asking you to define potential GDP and explain its determinants. So assume if you do not know about potential GDP as to what it is, always break down the keywords to be able to figure out what that particular point is. The students, when you see the word called potential, what do you mean by that? A human potential, right? So when you see the word potential, that is the ability or the maximum achievement that a person can do is the human potential. Similarly, when we are talking about a potential GDP, the maximum growth a country can sustain over a period of time is said to be called as the potential GDP. So you can define that and you can explain its determinants. What are the determinants that define what a GDP is? So talking about the inflation, where the demand and supply analysis, the health of the banking sector, the health of the financial markets, right? And here we can talk about the employment generation, the infrastructure development. All of these are determinants that determine what is a potential GDP of a country. So in the first part of the question, you have to define the potential GDP and explain its determinants. So you have to list down the words and explain it. And since it is a 10-mark question, you can just write it in one line. And the second part of the question, they're asking what are the factors that have been inhibiting. So here, if you see in both these questions, you can give more emphasis to the second part of the question than the first part of the question. So in the second part of the question, if you see, what are the factors that have been inhibiting India from realizing its GDP? So if you look at the factors that have been inhibiting India from realizing its GDP, the first important thing is you can look at the capital formation in a country that can inhibit the GDP. So because only when there is adequate savings in a country, that leads to investments, which leads to growing of assets that can bring the revenue to the country. So absence of capital formation, we can look at infrastructure as one of another factor inhibiting GDP. We can look at ease of doing business factors as inhibiting GDP. Human resources, are they skilled and how cost effective they are determines the factor that is inhibiting GDP. So because here, when a GDP has to grow, you need the industrial sector to come in place. And for the industrial sector to come in place, the factors of production should be there. The land, the labor, the capital, entrepreneur, and how these factors of production are performing determines how the GDP of a country is. So all these factors can be mentioned to explain about how it has been inhibiting India from realizing the GDP. So where does India stand in each of these? So when we are, let us say, talking about when we are talking about the human resource, the employment scenario of the country, you can quote reports like Periodic Labor Force Survey has identified that India's unemployment is at the highest from the last 45 years, which is inhibiting the growth, the GDP growth of the country. So all these reports can be quoted wherever possible. Since it is a 10-marker, selectively identify the factors, mention 5 factors here, and to finish the question. So that's how you have to approach the second part of the question. Going ahead, the third question. The third question is about what are the main constraints in transport and marketing agriculture produce in India. So here, if you see, there are two parts to the question. Again, it is for 10 marks. So here, what are the main constraints of transport and marketing of agriculture produce? So these are the keywords that need to be tackled in this particular question. So you can divide the question into first telling about the importance of the post-harvest marketing of the agriculture. In India, if you see today, India has a agricultural surplus with respect to its cereals, but India is lacking in its post-harvest marketing. So the consumers are paying more for the agriculture produce, and farmers are getting less money. In return, it is the middleman who is actually making a lot of money. So the post-harvest marketing of agriculture is the issue. So here, the determinants with respect to the agriculture produce in India, there are two challenges here. That is with respect to transport and with respect to marketing. So you can divide that into transport and marketing. Transport and marketing. And when we talk about transport, so you will notice that there is an issue with respect to the transport. The issue is with respect to the seasonal availability of roads. Seasonal availability of roads. Second aspect is the quality of the road. The quality of the road that determines the transport. And third possibility is with respect to the availability or the development of other forms of transport. Lack of storage facilities. There is lack of storage facilities. These are the aspects that can be mentioned as the constraints with respect to transport. So as a part of infrastructure development, the increase of transportation will help in better exit mechanism for a produce to move out of the region of produce. So it reduces the cost of the agriculture produce. And when we are talking about the marketing part of the agriculture, here the issues with marketing are, the first thing is the regulation of markets. If you look at the regulation of markets, all the APMCs are guided by all the APMCs, agriculture produce marketing committees, are guided by the laws made by the state. And the farmer is expected to sell the produce only to a particular mandi, and he cannot sell the produce outside it. So there is some regulation with respect to the markets that they can sell in. The second thing is accessibility to APMCs. Accessibility of APMCs. Today, how the APMCs are serving around 450 square kilometer radius, but the recommendations are that each APMC has to be set up within 80 square kilometer, not more than that. So here, the accessibility to APMCs is a challenge that is affecting the marketing. And third, here if you see, there is fragmented marketing infrastructure. There is fragmented marketing infrastructure, which is another issue. Then, if you look at the marketing infrastructure of India presently, it is not favoring the small and marginal farmers. Small and marginal farmers are not favored. Why? Because they have to have the aggregate surplus to be able to sell at a mandi. But the small and marginal farmers comprise of 85% of the agriculture sector, where they do not have the adequate surplus to go and sell in the markets. And then for getting a good produce. And then here if you see, there is poor infrastructure of APMCs. Poor infrastructure of APMCs, which is also a constraint for the marketing. So these are the multiple reasons that you can quote under the marketing segment. So write it in points and explain it in one sentence to complete the question. So this is how, these are the main constraints in transport and the marketing. The next question is, again, students, this is a question which can be answered by looking into the previous year questions. What are the challenges and opportunities of food processing sector in the country? The first part of the question. The second part of the question is, how can income of the farmers be substantially increased by encouraging food processing? Again, this question is for 10 marks, so you are expected to write not more than 150 words. So students, in the first part of the question, you have to highlight the challenges as one part, the opportunities as another part. In the second part of the question, you have to emphasize how can income be increased through the food processing sector. So this is how you have to divide it. So if you're talking about the challenges involved with respect to food processing sector. See, first you can divide them into three segments. The first challenge that is there is quality and safety challenge. Quality and safety challenge. So if you look at the food processing sector in the country, 75% of the food processing sector is an informal sector where the standards are not standardized. So the quality and the safety of the products is a big challenge due to the lack of adequate storage infrastructure, the transport infrastructure. That makes the quality and safety a challenge. The second theme that you can touch upon is marketing challenges. Marketing challenges of the food processed foods. Marketing challenges. For example, if you take the culture of India, India has a culture of having sattvic food. So what do you mean by sattvic food? A freshly made food is what is good for health, is the culture of the country. So here, changing the consumer behavior, the affordability of the consumers towards processed food is a challenge for the country. So that is the marketing challenges that you can look into. And the third one, you can talk about supply chain challenges. Supply chain challenges that are present in the country. So you can divide the challenges into quality and safety, the marketing challenges, and the supply chain challenges. And when we are looking at the opportunity of this food processing sector, here it is important to write points which is where food processing sector alone can actually help us come out of those particular problems, or food processing sector plays a predominant role in coming out of those problems. See, what are the opportunities that we have through the food processing sector? The opportunity is, first one, we can have employment generation. Employment generation. So students, if you know, in India, agriculture is the highly dependent sector by around 49% of the population. So where does India get its jobs from? So if you look at agriculture, manufacturing and the service sector, the manufacturing sector has the highest potential for the employment generation. Food processing industry acts as an interface between the agriculture and the marketing sector. So the food processing sector will offer a new opportunity for the people in the area of agriculture for employment generation. So food processing sector can be an effective solution for creating employment. That's the first opportunity. So looking at the second opportunity, you will notice that food processing will help in boosting the trade, and with boost of trade, it will help in increasing the foreign capital, foreign capital. So India is looking at increasing the exports. So food processing sector can act as a primary, can play an important role in improving the exports of the country. So that's an opportunity that we have here. So by increasing the trade and the foreign, increasing the trade of the food processing sector with other countries, this way the agriculture sector can receive more input. I mean to say, they can generate more GDP from the agriculture sector. And the third opportunity that you can highlight here is it can reduce malnutrition. It can reduce malnutrition. See, because today malnutrition, stunted growth, these are some of the problems that Indian youth are facing, children are facing, because of which our demographic dividend can be hurt. So food processing sector can allow us to ensure that there is a balanced diet in the foods that we are having. So by processing the foods with certain ingredients. So malnourishment, which is a problem, can be tackled with food processing sector, which is an opportunity that we have. Then it can also curb migration. Curb migration. if you see, the food processing sectors based on the raw materials can be set up close to the lands where those raw materials are grown. And this way, the youth of that region or the people who are practicing agriculture in that region will find adequate employment around that area rather than moving to the cities for jobs. So it can curb the problem of migration. And students, you might have noticed that during the COVID-19, there was a reverse trend of migration where people moved from cities back to the villages. So it's a very unique trend which happened due to COVID-19. And this reverse migration, government has worked upon in building the infrastructure around that area so that people are holding back to that profession. And with the right foreign food processing sector being developed, the youth of the country who has gone back and practicing agriculture will not actually come back to the cities for jobs. Instead, find a new kind of an employment around the same area. So this is the opportunity that we have due to the food processing sector. So that's how we can answer the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, how can income of the farmers be substantially increased? So here the focus of the point should be as to how the income can be increased. How the income can be increased. So here the focus is on how to increase the income of the farmers. So as per the recommendations of Ashok Dalwai committee with respect to doubling the farmers' income, one of the points was use of food processing sector for increasing the income of the farmers. So how can the increase of income of the farmers can happen due to the food processing sector? So students, if you see, because of increased demand of agro products due to the food processing sector would lead to increased prices fetched by the farmers. For example, a fruit jam will consume more fruits than normally sold in the market. So fruit jam industry in turn is creating a new market for the produce made by the farmers. And secondly, here another advantage is as per the UN data, UN data says that 40% of the products are wasted, and the tune of the food wastage is close to 92,000 crore. So here with food processing, the food wastage can be reduced. Food wastage can be reduced due to better storage facilities and thereby better income to the farmers for farmers who are actually producing perishable products. Then another thing is food processing industry will always want more inputs. They want diversified inputs. So due to the demand that is there, the farmers are incentivized to produce diversified crops. So this way we can have crop diversification. So food processing industries can promote crop diversification. So these are the dimensions that you can look upon how income can be generated for farmers by encouraging the food processing sector. Many initiatives have been taken by the government in this regard for promoting the food processing sector. But since it is a 10-marker question, adequate points are given here in this explanation. You can select the points and write in one line to be completing the answer effectively. So it is important that you have to address all the points of the question and the demands of the question to be able to get the maximum marks in this question. Fifth question. What do you understand by nanotechnology and how is it helping in the health sector? So students, there has been adequate articles in the newspaper regarding nanotechnology, and especially during COVID-19, nanotechnology was used in the health sector. So here this particular question is very direct. So in the first part of the question, you have to explain as to what do you understand by nanotechnology, right? And in the second part of the question, you can mention about how it is helping in the health sector, the various applications of the nanotechnology in the health sector, right? So it's a direct question for 10 marks, which doesn't need specific explanation. Going ahead. The sixth question. How is science interwoven deeply with our lives? What are the striking changes in agriculture triggered off by the science-based technologies? This question is of 10 marks, students, but the statements are such that you can write an essay out of this, but they're expecting you to write just for 150 words. So how do you approach these kind of questions? So if you look at this question, there are two segments to the question. The first part of the question is asking, how is science interwoven deeply with our lives? The second part of the question is asking, what are the striking changes in agriculture triggered off by the science-based technologies? So when we are addressing the first part of the question, here the scope that you have for writing explanation for this question is not more than 50 words. So when that is a scenario, you should not go too much into the explanation. So here, what is the science that we are seeing in our daily lives? Our rational thinking, the scientific temper, is the use of science in our daily lives. An application of the science in the technology. Application of science is the technology that we see around us, which we are using to make our lives more easier, is the science that we're using every day. And hence we can say that the science is interwoven deeply in our lives. So the rational thinking, the scientific temper, and the use of technology is the science that we use in our daily lives. Today, with the understanding of the science behind everything that we are doing, our lives have become more simpler. For example, today if you're stepping out of the house, our understanding of the weather conditions has made us analyze whether it will rain or not, right? Our understanding of the electromagnetic radiation has helped us get maximum benefits out of that. For example, the remote that you use, where you use the radio frequency or the infrared rays, our understanding of the electromagnetic spectrum has helped us with that. So that way, the science is being used. And here, for a broader perspective, it is important that you just don't write about technology. You also mention about the scientific temper and the rational thinking to get a much more broader idea here. And in the second part of the question, they're asking, what are the striking changes in agriculture triggered off by the science-based technologies? So students, technology has a great role in the agriculture development of our country. So you can divide them into broader themes before you come down to a narrow answer. The broader themes can be about, the second part of the question can be the use of technology in mechanization of agriculture. You can divide it into the IT, information technology of agriculture, and also technology with respect to the genetics. So in these broad areas, you can divide the role of agriculture, so role of technology in agriculture, and you can point it out further points here to be able to write the second part of the question. So always have a broader thinking, a broader points, and from there come down to a narrow points that will make, so as I mentioned, you need a trigger point for you to think about a particular question. So the trigger points can be the broad idea followed by the narrow points. So this is how you have to approach this particular question. Going next. Next is the eighth question that is relevant for us. So if you look at the eighth question, what are the salient features of Jal Shakti Abhiyan? So students, this is the concept. Jal Shakti Abhiyan, launched by the government of India for water conservation and water security. Here they are clearly asking, it's a direct question. You just have to mention the salient features of the Jal Shakti Abhiyan. So here students, there's nothing much for me to analyze here. You just have to list down the salient features of the Jal Shakti Abhiyan. But the point is, why is this question asked? This is a topic which is there in current affairs because the government is taking steps on promoting this Jal Shakti Abhiyan for the water conservation and water security. A direct question has been asked from the current affairs. So this plays the role of current affairs. So, but just because Jal Shakti Abhiyan is given, you need not go and study about all the schemes. It is important that you know what is in current affairs and narrow down those topics so that you will be able to answer this question, right? 11th, explain the meaning of investment in an economy in terms of capital formation. Discuss the factors to be considered while designing a concession agreement between a public entity and a private entity. And students, this is a question for 15 marks. So this is a question asked from the chapter of investment models. And again, this question could have been answered by relying on the previous year questions. A direct question which is reframed in a different way. And my notes actually exactly discusses this question. So if you look at the first question, they're talking about explain the meaning of investment in an economy in terms of capital formation. students, they are asking you to define what is meant by an investment. So here, to give you in simple terms, what do you mean by an investment? For example, if you have money, let's say 10 lakh rupees, and if you go and buy a car for your personal use, is that an investment? Now, how do you question whether it is a asset or a liability? Yes, when you go and buy a car in a showroom and get your car out, if you plan to sell, is the value of the 10 lakh increasing or decreasing? See, if you notice, if you buy a car for 10 lakh and get it out of the showroom, and if you want to sell the car, immediately the car would have gone through a depreciation. In other words, it's also called as consumption of the fixed capital. So here the value of the money is reducing. So wherever, if you are putting your money, where the value of the money is reducing, that's a liability. On the other hand, if you are parking your money in a product which is helping you generate income, that is called as an asset, which is also called as an investment. For example, if you buy a land, if you keep your money in a bank deposit, if you invest in, let us say, any real estate or invest in securities in the markets, all of those are investments because those are assets which in turn generate revenue in the future. So investment is where investment means that is the money that is parked or an asset which generates income. So if you take that to a nation's level, the investment in an economy refers to creating assets that generate income for the country. And that is the reason why if you see lately, the government is investing on building infrastructure because infrastructure is an asset that helps in further generation of revenue for the economy. So that is what is meant by investment. So that's what you have to explain in the first part of the question. In the second part of the question, they're asking, discuss the factors to be considered. What are the factors to be considered while designing a concession agreement, model concession agreement, which is nothing but the public-private partnership agreement between a public entity and a private entity. So what are the factors to be considered? And as you can guess, the factors to be considered is, first one is you have to identify what is the risk associated with it. So first thing is there should be allocation of risk, the right allocation of risk, right allocation of risk. The second aspect you have to look into when you're forming a model concession agreement is the cost involved for the debt borrowed, the cost involved. So students, if you notice, when a public-private partnership is coming about, we are borrowing the debt from the private sector. Now, when the private sector, when the government is borrowing the debt from the private sector, there is a cost attached to it. And who has to pay the cost? The cost is either levied on the citizens or it is levied on to the government, where the government is subsidizing it to make it cheaper for the citizens. So what is the cost involved for the debt borrowed has to be analyzed. That's the second factor. The third factor that can be analyzed here is the political and the social factors. The political and social factors. For example, the land acquisition, the public sector workforce which is getting merged due to the PPP. So those factors have to be analyzed for in the agreement so that there is a smooth synergizing between the public and the private. Then the fourth factor that can be analyzed is the incentives that are provided, incentives and performance requirements. Incentives and the performance requirements. See, because you have to note that the nature of a private sector is it will do what has been assigned. It won't go beyond because it is profit oriented in nature. So it is important for the government to set the right incentive structure and the performance indicators so they can get the maximum output out of the private sector. So that is the next thing that has to be mentioned in a concession agreement. Then the fifth one is the legal and regulatory issues. The legal and regulatory issues. See why it is important. So students, if you see, when a public sector and a private sector are coming together, you have to note the primary intention of both. The primary intention of the government is welfare orientation. The primary intention of the private is profit orientation. So, bringing about the welfare orientation and the profit orientation can only be possible when there is a strong, effective legal and regulatory framework. If that framework is strong, if the adjudication of the legal issues are faster, that's when we will have effective PPP. Today, lakhs of crores worth of PPP projects have been halted due to these issues. So, these are the factors to be considered in the model concession agreement between the public and the concessionaire, between the public and the private sector. So, if all these factors are considered, if these risks are taken into consideration, that's when the PPP as a model will be successful. So, this is how you have to approach this question in 250 words. The 12th question, explain the rationale behind the GST is the first part of the question. How has COVID-19 impacted the GST compensation fund and created a new federal tensions? Students, again, the first part of the question can be answered directly from the previous year questions. And the second part of the question has been in current affairs, which I have covered clearly in the classes. So if you look at the first part of the question, they are asking about explain the rationale. What is the rationale behind the GST introduction? Second part of the question is asking about how COVID-19 has impacted the GST compensation fund and has created new federal tensions. So the question is for 250 words. Okay. So if you look at the first part of the question, when we are talking about the rationale of the introduction of GST, you can talk about three stakeholders. In an economy, there are three stakeholders. The stakeholders are, one is consumers, second is businesses, third is the government. Now, what is the advantage or what is the rationality of introducing GST? How will it benefit the consumers? So now if you think, through the GST, the government is increasing the tax base and reducing the tax rate. So when the tax base is increasing and the tax rate is reducing, what is happening to the consumers? So the consumers are charged less tax. So because of the lesser tax, the prices of the goods are coming down. So the prices of the goods are coming down and the price of the services are coming down. This way the affordability of the consumers are increasing. The demand of the economy is increasing. So talking from the angle of the business, so what is the advantage of the GST? So if you look at the regime previous to GST, there were multiple indirect taxes at the central level, state level. We had at the concurrent level. So here with the GST coming in, all those indirect taxes have been subsumed into one umbrella. So because of this, what is the advantage to the business? The advantage to the businesses are easier tax compliance, Second one is better interstate movement, because of lesser documentation. And third, and here we have the principle of e-way bill example. Then we have lower tax rates. So this way, the businesses are getting benefited by increased demand. And what is the rationale of introducing GST to benefit the government? And here, students, you have to note that government is actually getting benefited because the GST is happening on a digital platform. So the number of taxpayers are increasing in the country due to GST. Number of taxpayers are increasing, because of which there is increased revenue. I can say there is increased formalization. Then we can also talk about simpler tax administration. So increased taxpayers leading to increased revenue, increased formalization, simpler tax administration is the rationale behind the GST for the government. So like this, if you analyze the rationality based on different stakeholders, you will get better marks. Talking about the second part of the question, how has the COVID-19 impacted the GST compensation fund? So here students, you can just briefly mention about why is this compensation fund introduced? What is the rationality behind this compensation fund? So GST compensation is introduced to allay the fears of the states that allay the fears of the states of a revenue loss due to the implementation of the GST. And the GST compensation cess was charged on the luxury and the sin goods. But due to the COVID-19, the GST compensation fund is facing a shortfall, and the shortfall is to the tune of 1.38 lakh crore. 38 lakh crore. So due to the shortfall of the GST compensation fund, the center is unable to pay to the states, and center is giving market borrowing options for the states to overcome this shortfall. And the center is saying that the states have to, that it will compensate the states of the GST compensation fund after 2022, but the problem is it has not agreed to pay the interest the states might be incurring due to the borrowing they are doing for the GST compensation fund. So this has created the federal tensions between the center and the state. So this is the viewpoint that you have to use when you're writing and explaining the issue. So this particular question, students, by relying on the previous year questions and the current affairs, you can easily be able to answer this question. So under the public finance chapter, in my classes, I have clearly explained about this issue in a well mapped mind map. 13th question, what are the major factors responsible for making the rice wheat system a success? So that is the first part of the question. In spite of this success, how has the system become a bane in India? So there are two parts of the question, students. Here you have to mention about, in the first part of the question, the demand of the question is, what are the major factors responsible for making rice wheat system? That's the demand of the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, in spite of the success, how has the system become a bane in India? So you have to emphasize about how it has become a bane in India. So the stand is clear. So when we are talking about the factors responsible, here we can divide the factors into, first one, the social factor. So students, if you talk about the social factor, you can notice that in India, predominantly, the agriculture has been subsistence. So when it been subsistence, the focus is more on the food grains rather than other crops. So subsistence agriculture and the social factors are one of the factors making the rice wheat system a success. So second factor you can look at is the technological factor. Technological factor. So when we are talking about the technological factor, the introduction of the green revolution and the introduction of the high yield variety of crops, the introduction of the irrigation facilities has created a production of cereals in the country. So the rice wheat system was a success due to the technological factors. Then you can also mention about institutional factors. Institutional factors. So here if you see the institutional factors, the minimum support price that has been offered to the food grains predominantly was limited only to the cereals for a while, and later it was expanded to multiple crops. So the MSP regime also encouraged the farmers to produce more and more cereals, right? And even today lately, we have the food security program, where the food security program is specifically focusing on cereals and pulses. But cereals is given the maximum focus here, because of which the rice wheat system has been a success in the country. So today we are a food surplus, but there are certain challenges. So, and one more thing is infrastructure factors. Infrastructure factors, where it is because storage of food grains is more easier when compared to other products. So that is also a factor that has made the rice wheat system a success. So this is how we can divide the factors which are responsible for the success of the rice wheat system. And going ahead, in the second part of the question, you can mention about how it has become a bane in India. How is this rice wheat system has become a bane in India? So students, you think right now, when we are growing only rice and wheat, what are the problems that we are facing? The first dimension of the problem is India is food surplus, no doubt about it. India is food surplus, but India is not self-sufficient with respect to other products. India is not self-sufficient. Second dimension, due to growing of rice and wheat, what is happening is food security is there, but no nutritional security. That is the second factor. Then, if you are growing only rice and wheat system more, what is happening? It is leading to monoculture. Due to monoculture, what is happening? There is pest resistance. Then, more and more of rice and wheat growing on, and due to less crop diversification, what is happening? The soil chemistry is affected. It has an impact on soil chemistry, right? Then, due to the rice and wheat system, due to the green revolution, and due to excess use of irrigation, because rice being a water intensive crop, it can also lead to soil salinization. So students, this way, these are the points that you can mention with respect to the success and how it has become a bane in India, right? So this is how you can approach this particular question. Again, divide the question into different parts, address the demand of the question to get the maximum marks. So when you're writing these points, the more the points you write, the better the marks that you can get. And these points can be substantiated with examples relevant. Next, the 14th question, suggest the measures to improve water storage and irrigation system to make judicious use under depleting scenario. Again 250 words. So here they're asking you to suggest measures for what? For improving water storage, which is one part, and irrigation system, which is another part. So under water storage, you can divide them into two parts. So when we are talking about the water storage, you can divide it into one, natural water storage, and you can divide it into artificial natural storage. When we are talking about the natural storage of water, we can talk about the lakes, we can talk about the ponds. When we are talking about the artificial water storage, we can talk about the aquifers. Now, after we divide this way, we can talk about what are the measures that we can take for improving the water storage systems. For example, when we are talking about the lakes and the ponds, you can talk about the points as we can avoid acquisition of the water sinks. We can avoid acquisition of the water sinks. So if you have seen the Uttarakhand floods occurred because the water sinks have been acquired due to the increased urbanization in that region. So when the water sinks were acquired, that will not lead to floods. Then ensure that eutrophication is not there. No eutrophication. So these are the aspects that you can mention with respect to the measures to ensure that the lakes and the ponds, which are natural water storage facilities, are better and safe. And when we are talking about aquifers, we can talk about ensuring that we can avoid the runoff. We can avoid the runoff of water. So here the Rally for Rivers, which was a scheme taken up by the Sadhguru, was also in this context where when we are setting up more water, the runoff of the water will be slowed down and more penetration of the water will happen. And in the urban areas, we can think of water capture platforms. Water capture platforms. And as the MS Swaminathan committee has recommended, you can highlight these kind of facts. Say that make aquifer water sanctuaries and keep it limited to the use under exceptional circumstances. That can be another solution. So these are the measures that we can take on the policy side, on the environmental side, the science and technology side for improving the water storage. When it comes to the irrigation part of it, when we are talking about the irrigation part of it, here you can mention about what are the irrigation measures that we can take to improve the irrigation system. So here we can focus upon precision farming, that is drip irrigation, system of rise intensification that we borrowed from Madagascar. All those examples can be provided. And here we can also talk about plastic culture, which is a technology where after you grow a crop, you cover it with plastic. After the watering is done, you cover it with plastic so that the water evaporation is reduced and more water goes into the crop. And we can also talk about water rationing that can be done due to tube wells. Water rationing. This water rationing has helped Punjab increase its groundwater levels. So these are some of the measures that can be taken for improving the irrigation systems. So if you have worked upon the syllabus effectively and the previous year questions, you would have been able to answer this. And secondly, this is how we can divide it and be able to answer the question. So we have to address it in different segments to be able to get the maximum marks. And students, here, when we are starting this question, you can mention some interesting facts that the fresh water only comprises of 1% of the 1% of the water available on planet Earth is fresh water. In that, 80% of the water is going for agriculture. So if we are able to reduce the water intake in the agriculture sector, we will be able to create more drinking water facilities for the people. Such kind of interesting facts can be mentioned as the start, followed by explanation for the questions. This can help us in getting better marks. Next, 15th question. The 15th question is about COVID-19 pandemic has caused unprecedented devastation worldwide, which is the context of the question. However, technological advancements are being availed readily to win over the crisis. Give an account of how technology was sought to aid the management of the pandemic. So students, here, the question itself is giving a direction as to how you have to go about answering. So in the first part of the question, you have to use this context and explain and expand the context about how pandemic has caused an unprecedented devastation. When you talk about the unprecedented devastation, the number of deaths that has been caused, the number of people that you are affected approximately, you can mention, how the economy was hurt, how people migrated from one place to another in search of employment, how people were stranded without being able to move. So all these aspects, either of them can be mentioned here in the first part of the question to help to expand on the context. And in the expansion of the context, you can mention about how the role of technology has been done in the COVID-19, how technology was used to tackle COVID-19. So in this scenario, you can mention about the latest technological developments that has happened in the area of 3D printing, where 3D printing is used for making many items. We can talk about the technology or the use of technology for ensuring that there is adequate spread of information, of right information. And you can give the example of Google's DeepMind. So right spread of information used to technology. Then we can also talk about the use of drones for contactless, for sanitation that has been taken, for transportation of the test kits. We can also talk about data analytics and artificial intelligence, where this information was used for narrowing down the people, for contact tracing, and also for formulation of the vaccines, where multiple trials can be done at a much faster pace due to data analytics and artificial intelligence, and even temperature monitoring. So students, in this particular question, if you see, when you are writing this question, if you can just recollect what you saw around you, what is being used in the latest times, what are the technology that you were involving in during the COVID time, that can help you get certain points for this question. So here the second part of the question is give an account So you just have to go on mentioning about what are the various technologies that has helped making the situation better during the pandemic. This is how you have to answer the question. Next. So with this, we come to an end of our discussion. So students, what I like to communicate in the end is, when you're making your notes, note making is the key to the success in mains exam, and the notes should contain the base as the previous year questions. So when you're preparing a particular topic, set the boundary with the previous year questions and then start your preparation, and always rely upon the current affairs to know which concept might be asked on a higher side. So this way, if you prepare, you will be able to effectively ace most of the questions. And here you need to note that when the questions are direct, you are expected to deliver more. So you have to go with a familiarity to the questions so that you can deliver more with good examples and facts. Go with the demand of the question and address the question according to the demand, and that's what will help you fetch the marks. And that's what will help you secure your interview seat. Thank you so much and have a great day.